Have you ever been part of an assessment center, either as a candidate or maybe even on the recruiting side? For today's guest on The Making of a Coach, this is daily business. Marcel Häbold originally dreamed of becoming a radio moderator, and that's why he started out as an apprentice at a German media company. He grew into several HR business partner roles until he eventually got fired from Amazon. This was the point when he decided to make a change in his life and eventually started out as a coach. Today he helps large companies select their leaders in assessment centers. And I was super impressed how this requires him to be an actor in a role play and at the same time observe the candidate and hold the space for all other participants. Towards the end of this episode, Marcel put me into such an assessment situation. So let's not lose time and get started.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
And we are on. Thanks for tuning in to this very first episode of The Making of a Coach. I'm Toby, a trainer, entrepreneur, and co-founder of MetaFox, and on this show, I'm following experienced coaches in their footsteps. We want to understand, how did you become who you are? How did you turn your passion into a profession? And how do you help people evolve? And as already mentioned, I'm super excited to be joined by Marcel Häbold. Marcel, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
I would like to start today's session with a small picture card exercise. So if you follow the link on the chat, you'll find a prompt question asking you which image describes your journey as a coach and how. So you can pick from any of these cards. And I see you've already done that. So we'll move on to presentation. And I see now a night sky in a snowy mountainous region, possibly in Scandinavia, and everything is magically illuminated by aurora lights. If you're only listening to this and not watching the video, then you can probably see Marcel's image also on the cover picture of the podcast episode. Marcel, take us with you into this night sky.
So that was a special night to me. It was the first time that my wife and we traveled to northern Sweden above the Arctic Circle. And we got to experience the aurora for the very first time. And I recall this night because we were desperately waiting for them and they just would not appear, or they appeared, but it was very cloudy, so we couldn't see them. And at that night, we decided to actually leave our hotel we stayed in and spend the night in the car in the woods. So we just really drove off grid and found a nice place near to a lake in absolute silence and no one around us, no light surrounding us. And then we got to experience the northern lights, the aurora, for the first time. And I recall this very moment because it was so special. We spent 5 to 4 hours outside just watching them. It was freezing cold, -2 or 3 degrees. However, we could not look at the sky. So that was really impressive. And why does it describe my journey as a coach? It was the very first time that I got to experience how small my concerns and my worries actually are if I'm in pure awe to a natural experience like this.
And back at that time, you were working as an HR business partner, I learned. Take us a bit into your life. How was your life and your background looking at that time?
So I did an apprenticeship as a media clerk, and after that I headed into the HR department. Back in those days, it was for a big media group. It's called the Südwestdeutsche Medienholding, and they combine newspapers, radio stations. I was starting as a junior HRBP, also getting my degree in economic law, business law, but then specialization on labor law, because that was back in the days what I needed to perform my job properly.
So you had joined the Südwestdeutsche Medienholding, a media company. In order to become a radio moderator, you joined after high school as an apprentice. And then
Mhm.
back then, the whole media group was in a big phase of transition, having to reinvent themselves to a certain degree due to digitization and the media landscape changing. And you had experienced HR as a department that's driving this change, that is a creative job. How did that evolve? And maybe you can also help us a bit understand what is an HR business partner actually doing on a day-to-day?
Yeah. Back in the days, there was a huge change and a huge challenge for us. The subscribers to newspapers, they were just kind of dying. There was no people who would subscribe to newspapers anymore as a print edition. And on the same time, news been displayed for free without charge online. So you could easily reach the website and get all the information without paying for it. And so the big question was, how can we make users, subscribers, how can we make them pay for the content that they were actually using or consuming? And yeah, joining in 2011, that was actually a critical phase about where's it going, right? What is the direction that we're heading into? It was very crucial because I recall that when I joined in 2011, there's been also made lots of people redundant because their jobs would just not be necessary anymore in the modern world. And at the same time, you were desperately looking for people who could install or program apps, right? Or to deal with more IT-ish things, which was not necessarily playing a role up until then. And yeah, when I joined, HR was actually the driving force in really embracing this change, this kind of change. So they would not just take care about all the legal stuff, like writing contracts or make people redundant or whatever. They would also really steer it towards a solution orientation and try to figure out how the world of tomorrow could look like. And that was really impressive to me because I felt that there's a huge power in shifting the perspective from, oh, this change is unfair. My job might be at risk. What am I going to do? To a more positive perspective, saying it is a change which is necessary either way. It will come whether I'm here or not. So I could now make use of me being here and actually drive this change forward proactively. And this is how I got to experience working as an HR business partner. I really loved it. I liked it because I felt that I could really add value to helping people changing their perspectives and also see the good things in this major change.
So you could help employees to keep the vision in mind and also drive this change and see the positive aspects of it. Sort of not only administering tough choices, letting people go, but also give them a sense of security and an optimism maybe during those times.
Correct. Yeah, it was really about, gathering or combining the powers that we had and also make use of the skills that we already had. And then also what is it that we need to develop for the future, right? To still fit the market.
And how did that change throughout your future positions then?
Yeah, so it turned out that it was a really cool understanding of performing the role as an HRBP. It was really new, it was innovative back in the days. And it turned out that many other companies that I was then working for, looking for the exact same thing, how to perform the role as an HRBP, they would not necessarily see HR per se, but also an HR business partner, not as to be the driving force when it comes to creating a modern working world, right? So that would really mean that I was then more managing people, like writing the contracts, writing the reference letters, making sure that the time to hire is really low. So that would be more what I was doing then as an HRBP afterwards, in which I did not like that much, as I like the creative role, the creative part of the role.
So the focus shifted a bit from people to processes in a way in your work.
Exactly. Yeah, correct.
Mhm. And I had already learned that one of the last stops, and I think it was around that time that you had this Aurora night experience, was joining Amazon, which seemed promising, as I understood, because it was also kind of interpreting the role of an HR business partner at an American company. So, how did
Yeah.
that go? Take us into your Amazon journey.
Yeah, it was a short but very interesting journey to me, yeah, because at the same time it was the start for me to becoming a coach. It was 2019, it was the Aurora night. I was on a limited contract back in the days, and my wife and I, we were very sure that we need to change something about the way we live because both of us were not as happy as we wanted to be. And then we learned in February 2020 that my wife was pregnant. And at the same time, I was also looking for a new job. And it was clear to us that we also need to kind of break boundaries from just looking for jobs in the area that we live. So we would really be ready to also leave the place that we live and move and resettle. So in this time, I got to know someone from Amazon, and we would just lose contact. And then one thing came to another, and all of a sudden, I was in this hiring process for becoming an HR business partner. And the process went really good for me because it was 4 to 5 touch points, and the last one was a really intensive assessment center over 6 hours, performing in front of the boss of my boss and other country leads. And yeah, I was offered a contract. So they really wanted me. And they also suggested that there is no Amazon tomorrow without you joining us. So they do really great in their hiring process. They really give you this feeling that they need you and that you are the best. And it also turned out that in the hiring process, of course, they would shed light on all the great things that they do, right? So turning their processes into green processes, striving to become the first carbon neutral company in the world, so zero emission, zero waste. They would also highlight that they are building their own electric cars. And yeah, so you really get the glimpse of that you might be adding value not just for Amazon, but also for the planet and the world. And as I just described, I was on my journey to become a dad for the very first time. You would definitely think more and deeply about what is the world going to look like when I leave, especially when there's someone on the way.
And then how did those expectations turn out when you faced reality at the company?
They do care about their footprint, but not necessarily up to you as an HR business partner working in one of their fulfillment centers to do that. So a fulfillment center is, you can imagine this as to be a really, really large stock of items. So you would have thousands, hundred thousands of items. They do have everything there from a football to healthcare, things that you can order online, whatever. So you can order everything, right? And that is a fulfillment center. So they have a huge stock of all of these items, and they would actually get the items, stock them, and then pack them if you buy them, and then deliver them out to the customers or to other fulfillment centers. And the HR business partner or business partners, they are obviously in charge for the different business units that operate on the shop floor, but also in the offices. You help them make people perform, so to say, especially regarding to low performers or no performers. So that means that you need to ensure that legally everything is correct. If you want to make someone redundant, they're really eager for people to perform. So if you're having a bad day, you should better not have it twice, because that might lead to an end of your employment with them.
Hmm. And when you say make someone redundant, it means letting them go.
Yeah, exactly. So that means releasing them from their contract. And it doesn't matter if it's a permanent or a limited contract. If Amazon wants someone to leave, then you'll leave.
Hmm. And I guess it also sounds a bit like comparing this to your previous stations as an HR business partner, that previously you had worked with white collar office workers, helping them in a way also on a psychological level, maneuvering change, staying optimistic, seeing opportunities. And now you were working with blue collar workers from potentially difficult backgrounds, being on the ground of the warehouse, on the shop floor, and having to pack and send X amount of packages per hour. And so, which is also a job that seems really easy to track. And so you can really point your finger at performance and focus on that
Indeed. Yeah.
much more.
Indeed. Yeah. It was not the first time that I was working with blue collar employees, but it was the first time that it was that heavy performance orientated, so to say. And obviously they can measure everything. They can measure how many items that you stock in an hour, how many steps you walk. They can also see how many packages do you pack, how heavy do you work, how much breaks do you have. So that they have great opportunities to manage and display performance. And obviously, if you don't perform at all, it's a high performing company, right? So you can either get yourself together and come back to a good performance if you showed it before. And if you're not able to do that, then that's it.
Hmm. And what did that do to you, this environment?
Yeah, it was kind of hard to me because to me, I can only speak from my point of view. To me, this was always a kind of black and white point of view, right? So either you're performing, then you're good, or you're not, then you need to go. And I was used to also try to find middle ways, right, to help people coming back to their best performance, to their best versions of themselves. And if that would mean that I have to have a chat with them or two or three, and if this is necessary, then I would focus on doing that to maintain, to keep them working for us instead of releasing them and finding someone new, right? And I was trying to take care about those cases in a personal way, so the way that I'm used to do that. And that was not required for me. And I back in the days I could not see this. I could not understand this. And yeah, that was finally one of the reasons I'm assuming, because I was not shared with feedback, why I then had to leave.
Hmm. And what happened then?
Yeah, so it was January, end of January in 2021, and it was towards the end of my shift. And then I recall that my boss, she would approach me and ask me if I have a minute for her to have a chat. And I was like, yeah, sure, why not? So we went to those conference rooms, and there was this other site manager I never worked with before because he was not in my business unit. So we would not work directly together or close together. And I was wondering and asking myself, like, what's happening? And I entered the conference room. It was mid-pandemic. We were all wearing the masks, so you could just see the bare eyes from each other. And I recall my boss telling me, Marcel, I'm sorry, but we have to make you redundant. It's not working out anymore. And then she would just give me the termination letter, asking me to sign it. And I was like completely lost. I did not expect that at all. It was as if someone pulled the floor beneath my feet, right? And then I tried to ask her for feedback, right? And why couldn't we just talk about whatever it is that make you feel it's necessary to make me redundant now, to kick me out? And obviously, she would not share anything with me due to legal pressure because everything that she was sharing could be used against her if I decided to sue them. And yeah, so she would not share feedback with me. She was just really professional, very distanced, and having me sign the reference letter, packing my things, leaving all my card and permission cards and entry cards on the table, and then I had to leave. And that was the very last time that I stepped into this fulfillment center. Yeah, and then I drove home and I was on my way back home. It was 10 minutes drive. I was pretty okay, doing okay. I was like, well, that's it, fine with me. And then when I finally arrived at home, I would just burst into tears and I would cry all night long. That was a very, very hard night, tough night for me, but also, of course, for my wife.
Hmm. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was worth going into some detail into this HR business partner station because it seemed a very defining point in your journey.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, how did it define you and your philosophy, your view of people development going forward?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in first instance, after this incident, I would work right for my own development and for myself because I was at a point in my career where I had this huge responsibility for a little human being, for my daughter, which I loved, which I absolutely loved, and I wanted to be there for her and provide for the family and also securing them in some kind of way, whatever that means, right? So just to make sure that they are secure. And then I was laid off. There was no job. We moved. Pandemic. It was a delicate situation. So I really needed to ask myself, there was no other way. What is it that you want? Because obviously, this is like the fifth or sixth business partner station role that you took over after Südwestdeutsche Medienholding, and you're not happy. And that was the first time that I really that I let myself say this to me, right? You are not happy. That's not what you want to do. it's a hard thing to say to oneself if you build up your whole career on this path, right? Because this means that everything that you build up so far needs to kind of change. And first of all, this makes you very, very terrified of this step, of this transformation. So what I did is I was looking for a coach who could help me through this. And I found myself a really, really good coach, and I could cope with all of the thoughts and the things that were happening inside of me. And I could successfully create a start of the transformation that I was then heading through. And on this way, while I was doing my very own coaching and aligning with my own thoughts and wishes and fears and everything that I feel, right? Also dealing with my emotions, with my feelings. I learned that this is one of the core things I can add value to, not just for myself or my family, but maybe also in my professional life. And that was the first time I thought about becoming a coach myself. And then I decided to do a training, and that was the starting point of my journey.
What was that training like?
I did a coaching training because I wanted to become a coach myself. It lasts over 2 years, actually 18 months, but I need to prolong it a little bit due to father duties, so to say. So I did it in 24 months. It was a hybrid setup. So there was on-site meetings with peers and lots of practice hours, but it was also remote. So you would have also some sort of remote calls, just preparing you for the next section. And I did this. It was called the Psychological Consultant and Business Coach. That's what it's called. And yeah, after 2 years, I finished it and got my degree, so to say, as a coach. You're probably aware that there's not literally a degree that you can get in coaching, but I did my certificate. And at the same time, I found a new role as a psychological HR consultant, so to say. And this is when I started to work for A-Train and got to experience what it's like to be a consultant, to be in the consultant life.
Mm-hmm. So I understand the coaching education, you did that by your personal initiative in your personal time. And then at the same time, after Amazon, you were looking to transition into HR consulting. So going from this HR business partner role to a certain extent, joins a company for their own mission in a way and contributes towards enabling those people to fulfill that mission, then going into consultant shoes and also changing the way you saw yourself and your role in the world.
Absolutely, that's correct. In my coaching, we would use the sweet spot model, talking about strength, about motivation, and also about possibilities, and then finding the sweet spot. What is it that you can perform your best? And whilst doing this obviously the consultancy was one of the possibilities that I worked out for myself, which could be a fit for me, from shifting to being an HR business partner, but also kind of keeping the knowledge that I gained over the years, but then adding value in a different kind of way. And so this was when I got to know A-Train and I was introduced to them. And yeah, it was really great because I had the feeling that they operate on a very psychological level. So I would definitely have a gap of knowledge in this. But what I do have is, from coming from a business, having a good business acumen, knowing how big companies function, how decision processes work, and how to approach them. And I had a feeling that, or both of us had a feeling, Adrian and I, that this is a good fit because I was finally then offered a contract with them. And yeah, I started my journey with A-Train. So from the point of view, what is it that I can add, or how I can add value to whatever it is? And I found myself shifting from adding value to a company, so to say, which I'm employed at, to adding value to human beings that work for a company. But my direct contact point is not necessarily anymore the business or the company, but the people. And this is where my focus shift from serving the business to serving the people who work for the business.
Mm-hmm. And can you take us a bit into the business of A-Train? Like, I guess there's many HR consultancies. Who are the clients, the customers, and what are the problems they're approaching A-Train with?
So it's probably more complex than I describe it now, but you can say that A-Train is basically performing in two business units or in two business approaches. On the one hand side, they offer great assessment center and development center experience. So they lead companies or manage companies going through those centers and helping people to develop, right? To acknowledge their strengths, but also their areas of development, and then providing them with concrete steps on how you could develop further. And on the other hand side, they do a great range of transformation consultancy. So they really help companies to transform themselves holistically, right? So from the very start to the very end, if there is an end in transformation, that's what they do.
Yeah, and I guess you could connect to that on two levels in a way, right? Because you had experienced, for example, in the Me Group, very early in your career, a company going through this sort of transition, that A-Train, and now you as an HR consultant would help other businesses go through. And then secondly, you had also worked in recruiting as an HR business partner. You had probably taken part and seen and scheduled assessment center to select talent, select new leaders. And both of these things you were now doing coming from the other side of the relationship as a consultant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's correct. So I had good experience in performing those assessment or development centers. And I had also a good experience in performing those transformation changes on a process level, but not necessarily on an interpersonal level. And it was also A-Train who introduced the model to me that in order to create a successful transformation, you firstly have to transform yourself, because there's just no way to transform or change the environment and then having the environment changing you. It's actually you who needs to change first, and then you can change the environment. Because if you don't change your thoughts, your minds, your habits, your patterns, then you will always find a way to kind of head back to what you used to do. Yeah, and I found this to be really impressive. I worked 3 years with A-Train, and yeah, it was a great time for me. I recall it as to be really, really great.
Hmm. And how did your day job look like?
So I was a consultant, a senior consultant. So that means we operated in self-organizing teams. So there was no hierarchy within A-Trains. And so that means that we would be also responsible for managing our customers, also managing our costs as a team, right? And to also add benefit on a monetary level, so to say. So as a senior consultant, I would obviously work closely with customers, performing on-site, off-site with them, but also maintaining the relationships to them. But I would also take over kind of a leading role within the team, right? To see if everybody is developing, if we're heading towards being beneficial to the company, or is there something that we need to do if there's a discrepancy in what we earn or what the money that we take out of A-Train versus the money that we bring in. And yeah, this was kind of my role that I had.
Interesting. So yeah, that reminds me of that Boetsorg story, the Dutch caretaking company where social workers would work in these self-organized teams, managing themselves, managing their schedule, working towards the client. So is that the model you also followed?
Yeah, it is exactly the model that we followed. So it was actually as being self-employed employee.
So would that mean you would also really look at your own numbers as a team? Like you would see how much revenue do we bring in and what are our salaries, and then actually make your own profit and loss calculation?
Yeah. So halfway yes, halfway no. We had salary bands, so there was a bandwidth that we knew who was in between those bandwidth. There was not full transparency about the salaries, but we could tell how much costs that we add to A-Train. And obviously we would then also see if we can get enough revenue to cover it ourselves. Because if not, then you are dependent on other teams, right? Overperforming. It was actually a cool way to also foster collaboration within the team, but also to foster competition between the teams, right? But in a healthy kind of way, I would say. It was not unhealthy.
Mhm. Yeah, sounds great. And then at the same time, we already said you already knew the transformation side in some way, like from experience, you knew the assessment center business in another way. And what you were developing at that time, I guess, was also your coaching abilities, your consulting and facilitation abilities, right? How did that work? Like doing the coaching, education, working on the job, what would you say were your most useful learning grounds at that time?
Yeah. So coming from being an HRBP, transformation and or change projects to me would mostly mean negotiation with the works council, presenting the change to the employees, to the staff, and like being in this kind of role. And now I would shift towards helping others. So it's actually facilitating, right? So helping others to find the best possible solution themselves. So creating the room for them to use their full potential to create the best possible solution and outcome. And that was completely new to me. So I had an idea about how transformation was actually created or how you would perform a transformation from the HR point of view, but I never enabled a group of leaders to find the best possible solution, to create this safe space for them. And this is what I got to learn, obviously, really closely and deeply from the other senior consultants working for A-Train, but then, of course, also being able to directly and immediately applying content or things that I learned from my coaching education. Because doing the facilitation and enabling leaders in this scenario, you can make use a lot of what you learn as to become a coach. So it's all about active listening, to paraphrase, to really crystallize and share back what you're hearing, to ensure if it's correct or if there's a misunderstanding in the room, to also acknowledge emotions. How do they feel? Do they act and talk the same way, or is there a difference in it? So you could definitely make a lot of use of the coaching training, of the coaching education.
Mhm. If you look back now at this learning journey, what would be your advice for aspiring coaches, maybe working in HR nowadays, maybe being in your previous shoes as HR business partner or similar roles, and then saying, okay, I want to become a coach? Would you say stepping from operational HR into a HR consulting role did help you? And if yes, what would be your advice?
Mhm. Of course, it helped me and it also hindered me. So it's both of the stories. It helped me because I got to experience negotiations with leaders, with works councils. I had the seniority level that enabled me to then also operate with the leadership teams on the other side. And it also hindered me because being an HR business partner, it also required from me being the professional. And when you become a coach, it's actually the coachee who's the professional, and you just help them enable themselves, creating the room, as I just shared. And that was for me a huge learning because so my self-assessment for me is that I appeared more as to be the trainer who tried to tell people how to do things. But that's not really the task that you have as a coach. At some point in time, of course, you can close the room and be more divergent and convergent, but not from the very start. And I had to learn this because I used to really I really used to try to tell people what they should do. And that's just not correct when you become a coach. So my greatest advice, if you are on your journey to becoming a coach, is even though that you might resonate with all the things that people share to you or clients share with you, try to hold your breath for a little longer than you probably do and let them try to find solutions on themselves. Because if you manage to stand the silence that might appear, it's a mighty moment what happens afterwards. If everyone is quiet for a while, or if your client is quiet for a while, that's a thinking process that actually takes place. And if you don't disturb it, it's really mighty.
Hmm. So getting from telling to listening and asking. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. I would like to understand a bit better, how did you apply these learnings, telling less, asking more, listening more in your day-to-day work? Can you get us into that room with a client? How did that look like?
Yeah. So I remember working with an industrial company. They're located in Baden-Württemberg, and they had a new HR lead. And this new HR lead, he wanted to transform the HR team because they would really work very as HR managers, right? So writing contracts, writing reference letters. And he wanted them to also become a little bit more the creative part. At the same time, also dividing them into clear units, so to say, right? There's the service center for writing the contracts and the reference letters. There's the business partners who would support the business in growing and scaling and performing. And then there's maybe also more the HR development people who think about which classes can we offer and what's the development that we need to do. And as an HR business partner who did this for many other companies in different roles, I would have a very clear understanding about how you could do this in an easy and efficient kind of way. And then I was adding ideas and ideas and ideas due to my knowledge. However, I then learned at the end of day one, so it was a 2 days offsite that we had with them, that I had with them. And at the end of day one, I learned from the new HR manager that he acknowledged what I knew about how to set this up, but that he would also require me to add less suggestions because he wanted his people to get into this thinking process to make it their very own idea and not having someone presenting them the solution. Because then that's what I mean with inner transformation and outer transformation. So you need to transform yourself. If you don't do this, then you will find ways to go back to what you used to do because it's not your transformation, it's someone else's. And I recall this to be a really hard night for me because it was critical feedback and I didn't like it at all because I wanted to, feel acknowledged for what I know. And I also wanted him to be happy. However, it turned out not to be that good. And I really took this with me. And I recall the night I did not sleep like 3 hours. It was maybe 2.5 hours that I slept because I was thinking about how am I going to do the next day? What am I going to do? And I would shift the agenda and think about what is it that I can do so that they are happy. And then I finally recalled myself that one other senior consultant, he would put the team, the agenda together themselves. So in the very beginning, he would just present a time frame and say, what do you want to do today? What is it that helps you the most? But I never did that. I had no experience with it, right? So I put together a time frame, and the next day I was just asking, what is it that helps you the most today? What shall we do? And they put it together. And then it was my task to manage the room, right? To having them concentrate back and listening to what is it that they're sharing with each other? What is it that they're actually sharing? Is there something behind the things that they say? And then this was immediately my job, right? To listen to them, to really getting a glimpse of, is there a concern behind it, or is there an emotion behind it? Are we talking about the same thing? Do person A understand what person B says or not? It turned out that I could do this due to my coaching education better than I thought of myself being able to do it. And obviously, so from my understanding, I was still not super happy with the outcome of the day. But the new HR boss, he was happy. He was really happy. And he told me that it was an absolute improvement to day one. And I was super grateful and thankful for this experience. Also from being from the comfort zone, putting in the first panic zone and then coming back to the learning zone, kind of, it was a good experience.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Let me try to recap because I think there's a lot there. You were on the client side in a room with the HR team for 2 days, and in a way, the challenge they were facing were the challenge that you had faced many times as an HR business partner as well. So you had been in their shoes. You were kind of the best expert they could get. And on day one, you also showed that and contributed with your expertise, with your previous experience, bringing in suggestions, doing a great job from your perspective, I guess. But then getting the feedback, man, you need to shut up more. You need to, we want to create our own thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, on the next day, you were able to step into the listener role, as you previously shared, and then being able to listen. What are your goals? How do you phrase them? What are the words that you use? then also
Yeah.
being able to really keep those in mind instead of your own agenda and ideas. And then this enables you, I guess, also to remind people of their own goals when they go off track in a conversation, hold the space. Yeah, is that it?
Yeah, that's absolutely it. If I'm talking about this retrospectively, it was actually two things which I tried to protect. First of all, I wanted to be secure. I didn't want anyone to tackle me in some kind of way that I could not foresee or manage. The second thing, it's actually ego. I wanted to protect my ego because I wanted to be seen as a professional who knows it all. But that was just not required for me to do. If I could not let this go, if I would not have received this feedback, I would probably just kept on performing the way that I did on day two as well. And that would probably then lead to being a customer who was not that satisfied, right?
Mm.
It was a hard situation, but it was a valuable experience for me because I can make use out of it.
Hmm. So letting go of your ego and this wish of being seen as the expert consultant who knows it all, going into this insecure space of the listener, the coach, in fact, that enabled you to actually build a happy client relationship and a successful facilitation day.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah.
Mhm. Cool. So this was transformation work facilitation at A-Train. I think when I met you for the first time, you were about to leave A-Train a few years later. How was this journey and what sparked you to eventually start your own practice as a HR consultant and leaving A-Train, leaving employment, continuing the path from being employed at a company who has a certain mission, a certain product, to an employed consultant who supports other companies in fulfilling that mission, serving the product, and then eventually actually starting your own practice, your own company offering this kind of service. What did prompt this transformation?
So I think the initial thoughts that I have towards being self-employed and running my own business is when I started my coaching. So the coaching that I did myself, because I figured out that I wanted to really shift, right, from being an employed HRBP to becoming a consultant who can add value and help people to grow and to discover their potential and live it out, right, to live to their full potential. And I knew that I wanted to do this on my own business from the very start. It was just no possibility for me to do it because I was also a dad, a young daughter, providing for the family. So there was still this urge in me to also share some security for my family, right? To just make them feel secure because it's my responsibility now. I don't know how I can put this into words, but once you become a parent, the way you see things completely shifts. It's unimaginable how much transformation happens when you have a child and how deeper you think through processes or actions. I knew that I wanted to start this business when I did my coaching, but I could also see that there's still a gap of experience and of professional skills. So I had to look for an opportunity to develop and grow myself. And with A-Train, I knew that this could be a really great opportunity for me. And when I started and I got to learn the processes and how they work and the people, they have incredible, intelligent people working for them. This is also when I met Max, and he was partly self-employed. When I got to know him, he was my mentor. So he was the very first person of contact that I had at A-Train. And he's running a cool business. I don't know if you heard it before. It's called MetaFox. So this is when I got to know him, and he also introduced to me the idea of being self-employed in a more detailed and more precise kind of way. But I needed this step. I definitely needed this step. I needed A-Train to become who I am today. I think if I would have started being self-employed right away, it would have been way harder for me than it is today because I got to experience the system they are operating in. I got to experience the psychological way of transformation business. And I got to experience also Max, who was already leveraging being self-employed and could provide me with inside views. What is it like to have a GmbH? How can you pay salary? What is it else that you can have running over the company and stuff like this? So things that you not necessarily can talk about with someone if you don't know someone who has this. And this is, yeah, this was so it was planned from the very start at A-Train that I would be self-employed one day. It just then happened in the third year of being employed there because of the great contacts and possibilities that I then had, showing me a way to do this on my own.
So if we look back at your journey so far, Marcel, and try to connect the dots, then what I see is that you got into HR as an apprentice. You learned the craft of people work at the business. You took that experience and transitioned into a consultant and coaching role, also collecting all that experience of being in a room with a client and actually experiencing, I can add more value if I don't immediately share my expertise, but I listen, I ask, I am vulnerable. And that, I guess, that vulnerability also fostered maybe the courage to then be brave enough to then transition one step further and do this on your own. How did you do that?
Yeah. So it was a combination of things that happened. I really grew with the idea to start my own business and try to do things on my own. So I found the Freelance UG in March 2023 when I was still employed with A-Train, because I got to know a lot of people and was introduced to some possibilities to perform gigs and jobs on my own business, so to say. But I could not earn money with it because in German tax system, it's just not good to earn, besides your main job, also good money, right? And so I found the UG to create this legal entity so that the legal entity can earn the money and not paying me out. When I had the UG, then I started to perform 2 to 3 gigs. So that was transformation workshops. And in one of those transformation workshops, I got to know another consultant, and he introduced me to another company who was providing lots of assessment and development centers to customers all over Germany, but also international in the EU. And he arranged a conversation between one of the founders and myself. One thing happened and came to the other. And I did a short assessment for them. They assessed me to be a consultant who could perform in a partnership with other customers. And then it was a really concrete starting point to now I'm ready to leave A-Train, not necessarily having my own customers, but due to this partnership and also 2 other partnerships, I can already deliver services to customers and earn money with it. So this was a smooth way for me to head out of the employment contract and then being self-employed because of the partnerships that I had.
Mhm. So while you were still employed as an HR consultant, you started an own limited company and actually delivering your first services, having first gigs as an HR consultant, facilitating transformation workshops. So actually work that is quite similar to the one that you would have done with A-Train otherwise. And that enabled you to then take the step further and say, okay, now I actually leave A-Train where I learned the craft and start offering that craft together with other partners as a self-employed consultant with your own legal entity.
Exactly. It's kind of similar to the start of my career, right? So when I tried to become a radio moderator and then started in apprenticeship in a media group who has also radio stations, so getting close there. And that was the same actually with A-Train and then my very own business. So I started with A-Train because I knew this would benefit my personal journey of growth and enable me to then later do what I was actually striving for, which was becoming self-employed. And then I saw the opportunity to now do it in a good kind of way, so that my family and I, there's just no situation of zero income because it was just me working. My wife, she delivered my son in September 2023, and I would become 100% self-employed in January 2024. So that would mean she was not working. She's not working, right? So there's no income from her end. So it's up to me to, yeah, being responsible to earn and provide for my family.
Yeah, let's now look at the business that you are doing nowadays with your own legal entity. And from what I learned, this is assessment centers. So helping companies to select talent. Can you take us a bit into that problem space? What kind of companies are these, your customers, and what are they looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also development centers, which are pretty equal to assessment centers, but I will explain this in a minute. So assessment centers basically it is a possibility for candidates, for potentials to show their skills, but also their areas of developments that they bring when they join, if they join a company, right? So most of the time you would have a company offering a concrete job role, and there's some candidates applying for it, and after one or two instances, like having a phone interview or a personal interview on site, they would be obligated to performing this assessment center. And this assessment center is completely moderated, facilitated by external companies. So Freelance, for instance, or myself. I do have a really great cooperation here with a company which is called Profilem. So they are really advanced in, offering those assessment centers and development centers. They're really experienced. They have great knowledge, and they are established. They have a huge range of customers already. And I cooperate with them. So that means whenever they receive a request of someone performing or moderating an assessment center, they reach out to me and ask me if you have time. Would you like to do this or that or whatever? And that would then mean that I go to the companies and, yeah, perform those assessment centers and moderate those assessment centers.
Okay, so can you take us into the assessment center room? How does an assessment center day look like, and who is in that room on this day?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a variation of people. Most of the time, it's obviously the candidate and myself as the moderator, the facilitator. And then there is observers, and those observers, they can be from the business, can be the hiring manager, can be an HR business partner. It depends on what is the role and who's involved or affected by the hiring. And in this assessment center, it's a variation of exercises that the candidate is obligated to perform. Most of the time, it's 3 to 4 exercises, and it's always starting with a prepared presentation so that the candidate can come up with a presentation they were able to prepare beforehand to also gain some security and to arrive in the situation and in the day, but also linked to a short Q&A session afterwards. So they present for 15 to 25 minutes. It depends on what they're obligated to do. And afterwards, the observers, which is myself and the other people in the room, except the candidate, can then ask questions for a certain amount of time. That would most likely be exercise number one. Then the second exercise, it also depends on what you're looking for. It can be a case study. So sometimes you need to understand how able people are to navigate through complexity, uncertainty, deal with a huge and complex amount of data in a short amount of time, and maybe derive a strategy from it. Then you would use a case study. Sometimes it is more like it's a team speech that you held in front of your team, which is then represented and played by us as the observers to see what is their focus and how would they position themselves, maybe as the new team leader. So that could be a variation. It's always including an interview. So in the interview, we will really dive deeper on psychological behavior and try to derive behavioral patterns from candidates. So, for instance, we would ask questions like, have you ever received critical feedback? If so, why do you consider it to be critical, and what did you make out of it, for instance? Another question that I like to ask people who become a team leader is, what is your definition of potential, and how can you detect but also embrace it in your employees?
What strikes me about these questions is that you would drill in on actual factual behavior. So you ask what happened in the past, and you don't ask how would you behave if XYZ happened. Is that,
Yeah,
yeah?
absolutely. Yeah, that's correct. So we try to make it very inartificial. So we really try to make a use case out of it. What is it that you experienced already? Also seeing in every question, trying to see how much ability they have to reflect on themselves and on their behavior. Do they address and acknowledge emotions? Can they derive certain behavior from the way they felt? And do they know how to manage it maybe already? Is there a possibility for them, an ability to steer their behavior? Or is it impulsive?
Mhm. Okay, I see. So that means as a candidate, I start with a presentation that I could prepare at home. I feel secure, I feel confident because this is the part I was able to prepare and think about before. This is step
Mhm.
one. Then step two, I get another exercise, some form of case study or impromptu speech maybe that I need to deliver. So I guess I also get a bit of preparation time, do I?
Yeah, absolutely. Because after each of the exercises, there's an evaluation. The observers and I discuss what were strengths, what were areas of development, and how do we evaluate the candidate. In this time, they can prepare themselves for the next exercise. So it's most likely 20 to 75 minutes. So for a case study, it's longer, it's up to 75 minutes. But for an impulsive speech or for the role play, for instance, it's 20 to 25 minutes.
So I get to leave the room while you guys talk about me as a candidate.
Mhm.
And I guess different observers in the room take different focus points naturally. You, as a consultant, probably look more at the interpersonal behavioral aspects, while maybe the hiring manager, the boss, looks more at the content of the presentation. Does this guy, this girl have a good grasp of the business, the
Yeah,
problems we are facing? And
yeah,
then eventually we go through that interview. What is that role play part about?
yeah. I love role plays. So role plays can be a variation of setups, right? So it can be with a hierarchical dependency, it can be on the same level, it can be between competing business units. It's really up to the role that we are assessing in the moment. But most likely it is either you are talking as a team lead to your employee, so it's a hierarchical dependency, or you're on the same higher level, so team lead, for instance, or even above, and you need your conversational partner to change their behavior in order to progress on a goal that you have, right? But they would not
Mhm.
do it due to many reasons. And in this scenario, we would have pretty detailed instructions, right? So there's fake names, fake age, fake family background information, and they get to read through their instructions. And I, as the moderator, get to prepare for the role that I'm playing. And then we would really dive into those role plays. And it's astonishing. It is an artificial situation, but the time in which candidates can really dive into this is it's insane how fast they can how fast they manage to really accept the situation and take over the role that they're playing.
Mhm.
It was good.
So that means me as a candidate applying for a position and you as a consultant, but acting as an actor who also is a colleague of mine, we step into this artificial scenario and
Mhm.
actually play out how would we behave. And then I, as a candidate, am observed by all these people observing.
Exactly. However, it's also fair to mention that we would really mimic a one-on-one situation, right? So in a remote setup, the other observers would switch off their microphones and cameras. In a face-to-face setup, we would sit in a room so that the candidate does not see the other observers.
Mhm. So it feels to me that we are on our own on stage, basically, and the audience is somewhat in the dark.
Yeah, correct. Correct. So it shall be a one-on-one situation. Yeah.
Mhm. Interesting. Can we actually try that for 5 minutes?
Yeah, sure. Why not? The following scenario. So You are my new boss, okay? You are my new team lead. You joined recently, a couple of months ago, and I'm here for 5 years. And you recognize that my performance is getting lower, right? So something is odd. And now it's up to you to find out what is it that I'm struggling with. You overheard people on the floor talking about me that I'm not identifying with the new course of accepting customers, internal customers, for instance. Marketing can be an internal customer, or HR can be an internal customer. We are working in the IT department, okay? You and I are working in the IT department.
Hmm.
And you overheard people, me not acknowledging it, that we have internal customers, and also that I had a fight with the HR head of because he was really mad that the intranet was down. And I fixed the bug, but I did not tell him that it's fixed, or did not tell him at all that something was wrong, something was going on. And now it's up to you sharing the feedback with me that in the future, I need to let them know what's going on. I need to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I detected there's something going on with the internet. I'm already on a run looking for the mistake, and I will let you know once that we're there, right? Okay?
Okay. What's your name? And what's my name?
It's Peter. It's Peter. I'm Peter. And you are Dan.
Okay, Peter.
Okay? So give me a sign when you're ready, then I can go into my role.
Okay. Hi, Peter. Thanks for making time and stopping by today. How are you
Hey,
doing?
yeah. I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm also good. And yeah, as you know, I'm only here for a few months. So I really wanted to have this chat with you and
Hmm.
also understand a bit how you've been doing. Because earlier today, I got to talk to Chris from HR, and
Hmm.
he seemed quite upset. Has there anything been going on with you and him?
I knew that this was coming. It's HR. They are super annoying and they think that they're the center of the world. They are annoying. That's what's happening.
What exactly happened from your perspective?
What happened is that I tried to fix a bug that was putting down the internet. And that's how grateful they are, talking about me behind my back, obviously.
Yeah, so I learned from Chris that there has been an issue, and then all of a sudden it was up again, and he seemed to be a bit unhappy with communication going between us and them. So, can you let me in on exactly that was going on?
No, I don't know. I don't know what's happening in there. I cannot tell you what's going on here because I don't understand it. When I started work, I realized that something is wrong with the internet, that it's down and that people cannot make use of it. So I immediately started looking for the error and fixed it eventually. I find a really quick solution, right? So thanks to me diving into it and trying to grasp what was going on, I could find it and fix it. And now Chris is telling people how unhappy he is about me not communicating. I mean, it was absolutely clear that the internet was working again.
I'm not sure if he's all over the place. I just happened to run into him over lunch, and yeah, that's great that you were able to fix it that quickly. So
Finally,
I'm,
someone who recognized.
yeah, that's good. Has something like that happened in the past also?
No.
So how come you talk about Chris and the HR guys like that? Is there some history that I should know about?
It's just like, I just don't understand why we would empower them the way that we do now with our new direction of internal customers, because that's exactly what they do, behave like customers. They behave like they are kings. So there's absolutely no acknowledging for what I've done so far or how the internet was set up or stuff like this. It's just talking behind backs. And I'm not willing to do this anymore. I don't want this. I'm an IT guy. I don't want to talk to people. That's not what I'm signed up to do here, right? I'm signed up to make systems run and detect errors and fix bugs, but not talking to annoying people like Chris is.
Hmm. So what I hear is that you would want to have more gratitude in a way, because I think when I just acknowledged that you fixed the bug so quickly, you also seemed happy about that. So maybe it's that what Chris and his guys and girls could also do more often. Should we maybe pass on that message to them? How would you feel about that?
I mean, you're my boss. You should do this, definitely.
Mm. Okay, I can take that with me. And what could we do to make your situation a bit more productive so you can actually find your sweet spot and be happy at what you do?
I found it. It's just, the new direction. I'm absolutely not happy with this. I do not want to talk to customers, whoever this is. I don't care if it's internal or external. I'm here to fix systems. I'm here to do IT things and not to do those customer management relationship, whatever. I don't want to do this.
Mm. So how do you get, what do you find most meaningful in your day job?
I think I already shared this with you. Come on, then. It's working on the backlog, right? It's doing the IT things, heading into the system, creating the firewalls, eliminating bugs. That's what I want to do. And that's
Mm.
what I've been doing so far, right? So my previous boss, he was absolutely happy with me doing this. And now I need to talk to people and listen to sometimes also the garbage that they're sharing. I'm not willing to do this anymore. That's just not motivating to
Mhm.
me.
So talking about internal customers, I mean, one way that I might be able to help you with is to be a service provider for this communication aspect, I guess. I can do that to some extent, but probably not every day because we don't get to speak that often also. Do you have other ideas like how can you get help with this communication job that you don't like?
No, I just don't want to do it.
And are there other people in your team who could maybe help, or is there a way you could share these different roles?
We stop here and do a
Okay.
short reflection. So, based on the conversation that we just had, how do you feel in the moment?
Nervous, I guess. I
Hmm.
want that job, or do I?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was a bit unsure about the context and about my own goals in my
Hmm.
role.
Hmm.
So to what extent maybe can I also just please him and be okay and come up with a solution for him? So that I guess was part of. I'm not sure if in an actual assessment center would I have more information on that, and that would also
Most
then
likely.
possibly be uncomfortable for me because then of course I cannot just please Peter, and I also have to deliver uncomfortable news, I guess.
Yeah. So I was about to say most likely, yes, there would be more information. However, I now tend to say no, actually no. So if you are applying, so to say, for the team lead IT, maybe this could be a
Mhm.
good scenario. Then this would, so from a matter of fact, this would be the amount of information that you get. It's a demotivated employee, and you need to find out what's going on with him. He was motivated under the person performing this role prior to you, and now it changed. And you initiated the strategic change towards acknowledging business units, internal business units as internal customers. And based on this amount of information, from a matter of fact point of view, you would start. There would be maybe more information about how he behaves in breaks, that he's sitting all alone, and that he's not talking to the peers anymore. Stuff like this. That could occur as to be
Mhm.
more information. But matter of fact, that's it. And based on this and what you just shared, right? So that you were uncertain about what was my goals, what can I do? You said you
Mhm.
were unsure about how much can I force Peter into performing what I want him to do? And on the other hand side, how much can I be pleasant and try to maintain the relationship? And what kind of behaviors do you see behind those two options? What is behavior one, forcing him, and what is behavior two, being pleasant?
Yeah, I guess to some extent, my own struggles as a leader shine through here, right? To the extent that I think I'm not always as clear as I would need to be when
Mhm.
talking to people, because I also have this need to be liked and to deliver only the good news, kind of, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I guess that is a bit what was coming through here also with my conversation with Peter.
Yeah. And
But
tension between being solution orientated, goal orientated, and being relationship orientated, people orientated, right? That's the tension that we're dealing with. And this is a pretty fair tension that most leaders struggle with. So there is some goal that you need to reach somehow, anyhow. You need to make him perform again. You want him to perform again. And at the same time, you also feel the urge to maybe understand him and create this room and the space for him to share what's going on within him, right? So, and it's fair to mention that in those role plays, most likely there's no 100% solution that you can reach or derive from this. It's more we want to observe the behavior that you show us. So if you're over pleasant and just about, he can do whatever he wants and he doesn't need to talk to customers. So that could also mean that you easily give in and not necessarily stand your ground and also defend the business, defend the company. And on the other hand side, if you would be like, oh, extremely hard and trying to force him into this behavior that you want him to show, then this could also mean that you might be risking losing people due to maintaining your own goals and reaching them, right? And this could also then be a risk for the company. Depends on which department we're talking about and what's the other layers of complexity. But in this scenario, we could really observe a behavior that you show us, and then there would be also a reflection afterwards. So what I did with you, asking you how do you feel? Other questions would be what was your goal? How much did you reach them? What did you prevent from choosing another way? That would be also part of a role play. I would literally ask the candidate right after the role play those kind of questions to see if they did not do good progress, could they manage to understand why?
mm,
Is there a certain ability to reflect on it? And do they maybe instantly see another possibility or a key moment in which they could decide to do something else to drive the conversation towards another direction?
it was surprisingly intense, I have to say. Yeah, I guess if I could do it again, I would talk more about this service attitude and customer attitude, which, as I learned now, I initiated, and I could also see myself initiating that,
Mhm.
kind of conveying this mindset that all of us are service providers. Also, I, as Dan, am a service provider towards Peter. Peter is my
Exactly.
customer. Peter has
Yeah.
customers in the HR department.
Yeah.
And maybe see if I can find a way to help Peter to understand that, because that's actually what I genuinely, as both as Peter and as Toby, would believe in, I guess. Um,
As Dan and Toby.
yeah.
But you're good, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And what would you, so okay, let's be Toby and Marcel again. And I'm wondering, what would you look out for as a consultant? Like what is good or any red flags, or which kind of behavior are you looking for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I shared with you the tension that we have within this role play. So obviously, I would always, if there's a tension embedded, I would also try to figure out in which way he or she tries to go. So what's the comfort zone actually? What is it that they try to make progress with? And on the same hand side, I would also look about how authentic they are. Sometimes they mimic as to be the heart leader, but they're actually not. And you could really tell this because they don't make any progress with it, obviously. And on the same hand side, you see dysfunctional behavior so that the body language or the mimic does not really fit the words that they're expressing. This is also something that I'm really looking at and observing. Um, and then finally, last but not least, the ability to reflect on this, right? So how do they assess themselves? Was there progress? Did they reach what they wanted to reach or no? What was a turning moment? Was a key moment? Do they acknowledge it? Do they recognize it or not? So those are things that I'm really looking for and trying then to put at center also in the evaluation with the observers afterwards.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's also what you're looking at. And how, I mean, I can really see how this has, in fact, helped me and how I learned something from even this 5-minute experience. So, how would a development center look different from an assessment center here?
Yeah, basically it's pretty much the same. So a development, it can also be a variation of exercises. The only sheer difference that you can put at spot here is that in a development center, it's not about getting a job. It is purely about having a glimpse on your development, on your growth, right? So what is it that you can develop? Where are you in your journey of becoming a leader or becoming a greater leader and more experienced leader, whatever? So this is the only sheer difference between an assessment center and a development center. An assessment center is linked to getting a position, a job, and a development center is a pure focus on your development journey.
So the
Could be.
structure would be similar as in presentation, case study, interview, role play.
So just yesterday, I arrived back from a 2 days development center offsite for a customer. We had 3 development centers, and they would start with a presentation. There was an interview linked afterwards. Then there's 2 different role plays. One is with an hierarchical dependency, one is without. And then there's finally a self-assessment, a reflection exercise in which we want to reflect, having them reflect themselves on what was a good performance and what is an area of development. Afterwards, there's 45 minutes set for feedback. So in which I would share my observations about key strengths, key areas of development, and also possibilities on how to build them up.
Mhm. And when you say there were 3 development centers, then it means it was 3 people who
Exactly.
joined as participants, and each of them had a one-on-one experience.
Each of them had a one-on-one experience. So that means Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and then Tuesday morning. And at Tuesday afternoon, it was all the feedbacks for all of them. So for candidate 1, 2, 3.
Wow, that's a big investment in people. Great.
It is. And you have to consider that this is only the starting point for their development journey, right? Because with the then observed areas of development and the shared feedback, so the common sense on this is what I, as the candidate, need to work on. They start their internal development journey. So it's a huge investment from this company in their employees. So it's absolutely great what they do there.
Nice.
And this assessment center is completely moderated, facilitated by external companies. So Freelance, for instance, or myself. I do have a really great cooperation here with a company which is called Profilem. So they are really advanced in, offering those assessment centers and development centers. They're really experienced. They have great knowledge, and they are established. They have a huge range of customers already. And I cooperate with them. So that means whenever they receive a request of someone performing or moderating an assessment center, they reach out to me and ask me, would you like to do this or that or whatever? And that would then mean that I go to the companies and perform those assessment centers.
What you just mentioned is also interesting because it sounds like you are using another partner company for your client acquisition in a way, right? So you're working with an intermediary between you and the end client. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. They have a huge network established over years. They have really great competencies, and they are operating on this model so that they have a little team of permanent staff they would use to maintain customer relationship, to ensure that processes flow smoothly. And they have also this facilitator pool of freelance facilitators they would contact since they operate all over Germany, but also international in Europe. They would call me out if they have customers in southern Germany because it's easy for me to reach, or in Austria or in Switzerland, for instance. Yeah, that's the way how we collaborate.
So from their perspective, it's great to have you because you are not a continuous cost in their personal balance sheet.
Exactly. Yeah.
And at the same time, when business is going well, they can call you up and you would basically take over the work.
Yeah, correct. That's correct.
Interesting. And would you say that's a model that you can recommend to also freelance coaches, freelance consultants starting out, partnering with someone like Profil M or possibly also A-Train and going into this role as a freelance partner? Like, what are the ups and downs that you see in this?
Yeah, so I can definitely recommend it because it kind of provides you with some security. Of course, there's no security that Profil M will be blessed with lots of requests for all the time and forever. However, I can definitely recommend it for the very start because it kind of takes pressure from you.
Hmm. Because you're able to change some security, because if business is not going well for your partner company, then you might also end up without any jobs.
Yeah,
But at
and
the
you
same
can
time, you probably earn much more than if you were employed at such a company because you are paid on a daily basis, right? On
and
the
you can
results you deliver.
exactly at the very beginning, you can really concentrate on the service that you provide, and you don't have to necessarily concentrate on building up customer relationships or how can I advertise myself. You don't need to deal with it necessarily, right? So you can concentrate on the content.
So a great model for any coach and consultant who doesn't want to do their own marketing in a way, because
Yeah,
there's another partner doing that for you.
correct.
Thanks. So let's talk money for a minute. How much can you charge for an assessment center in your current role?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair question, and it's probably very interesting for anyone thinking about this way. So it's obviously a variation of rates. It's also dependent on the companies that you operate with. But I can tell you that my daily rate is between 1,100 and 1,500 net per day.
And that includes preparation time?
No, that does not include preparation time. So this is pure performance. So to say, if I'm performing an assessment center, which is a day, then I will charge one daily rate. And if there's preparation or maybe also post work, then I would charge this additionally, right? At the same rate. So this could lead to charging 1.75 daily rates for one day assessment center, for
hmm
instance.
hmm And how many assessment centers do you run in a month on average?
And so on average, I would say it's 8 to 12.
Mm. So that's a nice monthly salary you can take home, actually.
It is, it is. But due to, the fact that I'm operating with the UG, that does not represent what I'm earning myself. It's what the entity earns, and then I pay myself a salary, which is
Yeah.
lower than this.
So you're running your own company. The company also has some operations costs. And on top of that, you also trade some security that you would have as an employed consultant, because as soon as things don't go so well anymore for your partners, you might also end up without having jobs. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's it. But correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the risk in being self-employed, right? So that's what you trade in. You get a great amount of freedom in choosing what you do, but you trade in the security.
hmm And the company you founded, you call it Friluftslarv.
Yeah.
Why this name?
Yeah. So Friluftsliv is actually it's an ode to Friluftsliv, which is a Norwegian word that actually describes the joy of spending time outside. It has many connection points to my attitude and my personal life, but worth sharing is especially one. An initial idea of starting this company would be offering leadership retreats at the Arctic Circle or above to foster the sense of responsibility for nature in leaders and people who run companies and who drive decisions, and to also gather leadership teams off grid and really putting them in a raw surrounding, having them facing what it's actually like to survive and to live life at the purest possible, right? So kind of similar to my experience that I had in 2019 with the Aurora lights.
So this is the big next steps for Friluftslarv.
I would not necessarily call it the big next steps. I would say it's the ultimative outcome. So that's what I'm striving for. I have a strategy obviously put together for myself. This is at the very end of my strategy, so of my vision, what Freelance Love shall become one day. If I reach this, if I'm lucky enough to, being disciplined enough to follow the way, then this will happen eventually with Freelance Love.
So the making of Marcel Häbold continues.
It continues, definitely. Yeah, you're right.
This was my conversation with Marcel Häbold. For me, he actually opened the doors to the world of assessment and development centers as a super powerful means for development. I also found it quite interesting how he completely outsources his customer acquisition to his partner company Profil M. If you're curious to follow this path, you can check out both A-Train on atrain.com, they work all over the world, or profil-m.de, they are mainly focused on the German market. If you want to discover other powerful coaching interventions, I can recommend checking out the brand new MetaFox Coaching Tools Handbook. In there, the MetaFox team and also the MetaFox coach community collected over 50 methods with clear how-to recipes as well as some theoretical background. You can download it for free on metafox.eu/handbook. Thanks for staying with us until the very end. Our next episode is only a week away when I'll be meeting Helen, a Belgian coach who runs a thriving corporate coaching and training business. To not miss this, subscribe on your favorite podcast app and send me your feedback on today's episode through the MetaFox coach community or simply as an email to tobias@metafox.eu. Much success and joy on your journey. Cheers and bye-bye.